Chapter 1. Nurture your craft. Wisdom over knowledge. The world has changed a lot since Sun Tzu's time, but we haven't. Technology has forever improved the quality of my life, and I, like most people, I assume spend more time on the computer than talking to others. But despite all the technological advancement, I suspect that I'm not that different from a peasant living in China over 2,000 years ago. We might look different, but the roots of our pleasure and pain probably haven't changed much at all. I know this because as I grow older, I'm beginning to see patterns around the struggles that keep me perpetually trapped. Struggles around trying to maintain friends, my arguments with my wife about not communicating enough, or the emotional roller coaster I feel in striving to create a future I can claim to be my own. Sometimes I find myself lying in bed asking, is this all there is? It's a realization that my struggles are common, mundane, and boring. Certainly, the problem can't be a shortage of information. There's more information at our fingertips than ever before. I feel fortunate that I can find communities of like-minded people online who are discussing problems that I previously thought were so unique to me, and only me. Case in point, my friend was struggling as the only competitive Asian woman weightlifter in her area who was under the age of 25 and 5 feet tall. Amazingly, she managed to find a network of similar women across the globe in places like Japan and Brazil. More information and connectivity has been great, but why do we still feel stuck? I've come to realize that dealing with my life's mundane struggles isn't a matter of having more knowledge, it's a matter of having enough wisdom. I need new skills that I can apply to my life, not just a better expression of the problem. Knowledge isn't the same as wisdom. I can be knowledgeable about an infinite number of topics, but I might not understand any of it enough to be able to apply it. I can learn mathematical formulas and expressions, but give me a slightly different equation, and I'm dumbfounded. Confucius said, deliberation without learning is a waste of time, and learning without deliberation will just be forgotten. The knowledge we accumulate must go through a process of internalization before it can be called wisdom. We have to deliberate on it, and we have to look for new ways to experience it before we understand how to apply it. Think of knowledge like food. It's no use to us in its raw form. We must process it before we can use it as a source of energy. Wisdom is being able to apply the knowledge that we have using our sense of reason and judgment. Wisdom is our ability to assess the situation, decide on the direction we should head toward, and know what actions we should take once we get there. Wisdom is the strength of our decision-making. If we know that all roads lead to Rome, wisdom is knowing exactly which one to take. The world starts off strangely foreign to us, but honor it and keep searching for the answers, and it'll make you stronger. Needless to say, the art of war is our platform for developing wisdom. Sun Tzu won't give you the answers to questions like how to mend your relations with your girlfriend or boyfriend, but that's not the point. Would you even want to get advice from an ancient Chinese man anyway? What he'll do is help us to figure out the truth by enriching our perspective. An artist won't be able to teach you taste or creativity, but he can teach you the basic strokes and how they generally approach the canvas. The rest, I'm afraid, is up to you. Chinese silver medalist Jingru Ixui was once asked about her performance after a close wrestling match. She said, I felt like our skill level was almost the same, but my opponent had the better frame of mind. Between two equally skilled and knowledgeable individuals, success will come down to the clarity of a person's mind and judgment. In wrestling, wisdom is about knowing what techniques can be used on an opponent and when. In life, it's about knowing how to constantly bump into the limits of your mental and physical capabilities and push further still. It's about deeply believing that all problems are workable. In the Ming dynasty, a military court official named Yuan Lia Orfan was told by a monk that he would only live to the age of 53 and that he would die with no children. At first he disregarded the monk's advice, but soon it seemed as though the monk's predictions were happening with frightening accuracy. Fortunately, he lived until the ripe age of 69 and had 4 sons. When he died, he left his sons 4 books about his experience of changing his destiny. He wrote, if God wanted to give a person wealth and riches, power and fortune, he would first bestow on them wisdom, because a person without sufficient judgment would not be able to retain even the greatest fortune. If you gave an expensive necklace to a child, they would be more likely to break it than get any value from it. To Yuan Liu Fan, there was an explicit order to how heaven would change our lives, wisdom first, fortune second, and how right Yuan Liu Fan was. About 70% of people who win the lottery or come across vast sums of money wind up broke in a few years. There's no shortage of stories out there reinforcing Yuan Liu Fan's point, but indulge me for one moment so that I may share one of my personal favorites, the story of Juicero. Juicero was a company that made a device for juicing fruit and vegetables. The Wi-Fi connected device pressed juice from pre-packaged packets sold exclusively by the company. In 2014, the company received $120 million in funding and retailed its juice press for the reasonable price of $699. No doubt some thought that it was worth it, as it was a beautifully designed and engineered machine. It was clean, minimalistic, and pressed juice with over 4 tons of force. Impressive. Juicero's founder compared himself to Apple's Steve Jobs. Perfected by earth, pressed by us, he said. However, Juicero's success was short-lived. 3 years later, Bloomberg News published a story revealing that Juicero's juice packets could easily be squeezed by hand, producing the same quality of juice as the machine. Venture capitalist Ben Einstein wrote, Juicero's press is an incredibly complicated piece of engineering, but the complexity was unnecessary and likely arose from a lack of cost constraints during the design process. Later that year, Juicero announced that it was suspending all sales and was searching for a buyer for the company. Unfortunately for Juicero, the company was bestowed with great fortunes first and wisdom second, not the other way around as Yuan Liu Fan would have wanted it. I once stayed at a friend's house on holiday with him and his wife. I went on holiday because I wanted to relax and not do much at all. But after the first day, I had to leave and move to a hotel. Not because something went wrong, but because things were going too well. In an effort to be accommodating, my friend's wife was spending too much effort on making sure I was taken care of, asking me questions about what I wanted to eat for breakfast and when. Okay, she was trying to be helpful, but it was a holiday. I wanted to enjoy being a man of leisure, operating on no particular schedule at all. The ancient historian Sima Qian said, a person who does wrong will inevitably meet their own ill fate. That is something that we've seen time and time again throughout history. Nobody can reverse this. But a person who does good may not be rewarded at all, because what they believe to be good may not actually be true unless they have the wisdom to know what doing good means to the other person. Water can lift boats, but it can also sink them. I regularly read the blogs of venture capitalist Fred Wilson, who seems to have a knack for helping his audiences take a broader perspective on life. In a blog published in 2019, he writes, one of the traits of successful founders is their ability to turn a loss into a win. Investors pass on your funding pitches, people pass on your job offers, customers pass on your sales efforts, competitors take your customers and your employees, and on and on and on. But inside of each of those losing moments is the opportunity to turn it into a win. You lose out on an important hire, and in a pinch, you promote a promising person from within, and they turn out to be a superstar. You lose out on an important hire, and in a pinch, you promote a promising person from within, and they turn out to be a superstar. My point is that losses are opportunities to win. You just have to see them as such and find the win in the loss. This is all about resilience, optimism, and tenacity. The most successful founders have it in spades, and it can be a learned skill. But you have to get your head in that space to learn it. Well said, Fred. What Fred describes as the ability to see losses as opportunities, I see as wisdom. And as he describes, it's like a muscle that is strengthened through our experiences, deliberate focus, and pushing through innumerable failures over time. What matters is our willingness to stick with it. Our willingness to always take that step forward, with the faith that we'll one day be able to do something we couldn't do before. A funny story I heard about Albert Einstein was not about his work, but his 2 cats. He loved both cats dearly, but it turns out he didn't love them equally, as one was unusually overweight. Einstein loved their company, but he found it annoying to have to let them in and out of the house. His solution was to create 2 cat doors, a larger door for his morbidly obese cat and a smaller one for the other. Sure, a single door might have been sufficient, but if Einstein saw the world in such simple terms, well, we might not know why the stars and galaxies exist today. Simple is good. Simple gives you clarity, but simple doesn't always equate to the truth. Sun Tzu didn't see the world as black and white. He saw it as a world filled with all manner of wonderful shades and bright colors. The world wasn't a place that was binary. Things were neither absolutely positive nor completely negative. One aspect being true didn't make another false. To Sun Tzu, what was important was the perspective we chose. When I was younger, I was always criticized for being on the fence. I often found myself arguing both sides of the debate because I could see enough truth on either side. What I viewed then as a character fault, I now see as a gift. It's easy for us to feel passion and conviction when our world is binary. We feel safer when we can label events as good or bad, or a person as a friend or foe. But I'm sorry to inform you that this is not reality. No, really, it's not. Water has the power to lift boats, but also the power to sink them. We, as wonderful emotional creatures, want to find causes that we're passionate about. We want to find reasons to fight and to make a stand. We want to find a love worth dying for. But it's exactly our conviction that blinds us to seeing all the different sides of the die. If we could learn to take a breath before we chose a perspective, we might be able to make more balanced decisions. That's because this choice of perspective matters a whole lot. This choice of perspective determines our actions, who we are, and who we will become. Choose to be a leader, not a little person. Zhuangzi, an influential philosopher during the Warring States period, theorized that there were no differences between a criminal leader and a great hero. Suppose that you were the leader of a small band of thieves out on a heist in a small neighborhood. As you led your group into the night and down the dark alley, how would you know which house to rob? How would you know which house might have the most valuables in it? If you wasted time passing from house to house, unable to decide on the house to rob, your group would turn against you. They would get frustrated and probably call you stupid. Therefore, as the leader of this small band of criminals, it would be important that you could make sound decisions on behalf of the group. As a leader of this small band of criminals, you would need to have wisdom. Once you chose a house to rob, you would need to lead your group into the house. If you weren't there on the front line, your followers would refuse to go in by themselves. They might hesitate or run away scared when the moment came. As a leader of this small band of criminals, you therefore also needed courage. Continue supposing that your group had now finished robbing the house. As the group was leaving with their spoils, you had to be the last one to leave the house to make sure that no evidence was left behind and that everyone got out of the house properly. This was loyalty. You were willing to sacrifice your own safety for the good of the group. Finally, when your group made it home, you needed to decide on how to share the rewards evenly and fairly among the group. If you didn't do it fairly, you might not live to lead another heist. So this also required a sense of fairness and justice. Wow, who knew that being a mobster was so difficult? Who knew that it required wisdom, courage, loyalty, and justice? But are these not also the qualities expected of a hero? A man's luxury apartment was once robbed by a petty thief. Unfortunately for the thief, he was caught relatively quickly, given that the owner of the apartment was a prominent public figure. When the owner arrived at the apartment to identify what was lost, he saw the thief on the ground, restrained by police. He walked over to the thief and asked him out of curiosity, "There are at least 8 similar apartments in this building. Why did you choose to rob only mine? My apartment isn't even the first one in the building." The thief, thinking that he had nothing else to lose, responded, "I robbed yours because the other apartments had only 1 air conditioning unit, while you had 3. A thief who doesn't even have enough sense to judge which house would be most worthwhile to rob would not be a successful thief, let alone a criminal leader. To Zhuangzi, the qualities that made a criminal leader great were the same qualities that were required of a revered hero. Many years ago, a famous leader in China released a biography reflecting on the past few decades of his life. In his biography, he reminisced about when he was part of a heinous triad called the Black Dogs. As a young man in the triad, he was brave and edgy. There was nothing he wouldn't do. And after a series of successes for the triad, he was rising fast in the ranks and developing quite a name for himself. But despite his success, he later chose to leave the triad and distance himself from the underworld. That was because he had an epiphany. He said, being successful in the underworld was in no way easier than trying to be successful in life. They were equally difficult. The underworld had its own set of rules, expectations, and norms that had to be dealt with. But even if you managed to be successful in the underworld, it was not something that you could be proud of. It wasn't something that your family could be proud of. Your neighbors wouldn't tell their children to follow in your footsteps. He said that if he had the ability to get so far in the underworld, why didn't he try to do the same in life instead? That realization was the turning point for him. While he and you may not have read about Zhuangzi's philosophy, I hope that most of us come to the same realization on our own. I hope we learn that what we do with our lives is a choice that we actively make. It's not a passive decision or a choice that someone else makes for us. Pick your own path. I admit that it took a long time for me to learn this lesson, especially since I'm particularly prone to feeling jealous of the gains and achievements of others. Every fiber of my being compels me to want to attribute their success to some element of luck or timing rather than skill. But I've learned that it's more personally empowering to take full accountability for my own situation and to take responsibility for finding my own path forward, no matter what it might look like. Because what other choice do I have? Over time, I've begun to foster in myself, quite slowly, I might add, a sense of being genuine to my own life and to who I am. Sun Tzu did not believe in fate. Everything depended on the wisdom of people and how they chose to behave. It was about how they made the most of their situation and available resources. A person who was wise, brave, and loyal had the makings of a great leader, but this was never a given. People weren't innately good or bad. Somewhere along our journey, we make a choice to apply ourselves toward either being an underworld boss or an upstanding hero. Many people criticize The Art of War for being a book about trickery and deception. They criticize it for teaching people to mislead others for their own personal gain. While this can be true, these people only have a superficial understanding of the art of war. What they don't understand is, this view is a reflection of these individuals, not of Sun Tzu. If we read The Art of War with the intent of only benefiting ourselves or for promoting our interests, then Sun Tzu can become a tool for trickery and deception. But if we realize that his wisdom can also help us to do good, then it can bring about immeasurable benefits to others. The difference lies with how we choose to apply the lessons we learn. Sun Tzu believed that his work should only be used to help leaders and not the small people. In Chinese, this phrase used to describe particularly wicked people who are only looking out for themselves. Small people plan and strategize only for their own benefit at the expense of others. But it's also because of their small minds that they'll never amount to much in the world. For the rest of us, we need to dream big. Bigger than you ever thought possible, and then even bigger still. That's because, as Sun Tzu understood, it's through people that the dreams of heaven are fulfilled. Think about it. Everything on this planet was created by nature, but only through the craftsmanship of people can materials reach their full potential. Nature created soybeans, but the variety of soybean products that we have today is because of the engineering of people. We have everything ranging from the milk we pour into our coffee to tofu, desserts, and soups. It took the ingenuity of humans to bring out the full beauty of something as plain as beans. Jade is a predominantly green mineral that features prominently in Asian art. Quality pieces of jade are highly prized, valued, and adored. They are pure pieces that seem to glow bright, deep green. However, one of the most valuable pieces of jade art was a piece that was made from the lowest quality jade. This piece of jade had streaks of red, a dull and blunt green, and black specks of impurities throughout. Most people rejected the stone because of its faults, but eventually this stone arrived in the hands of a skilled and talented artist. He looked at the stone and through his imaginative hands transformed it into a beautiful jade watermelon. The streaks of red became the watermelon's flesh, and the specks of black the watermelon's seeds. Through his craftsmanship, he transformed something that was cheap and worthless into something priceless. That was, unmistakably, wisdom at play. When we give something of great value to someone who does not have the wisdom to know what to do with it, they'll squander the opportunity. But place the lowest quality resources in the hands of a brilliant artist like Banksy, and they create art that can shock the world. Great leaders nurture their ability to craft. They know that value doesn't only come from the worth of the raw pieces of material they're given. Our wisdom and ingenuity is used to turn whatever life gifts us into our own work of art. A tale of two recipes. A small family in a rural area had kept a certain recipe secret in their family for generations. It was a recipe for an herbal paste that, when applied to a person's hands or feet, would protect them from chafing or drying out. The family had a small business selling different colored cloths, and the herbal paste helped them to be more productive during the harsh winter months. They could continue to mix and dye cloth outside, even when their competitors had to stop working. A businessman was passing through town and after hearing about the herbal paste, decided to pay the family a visit. He gave them an attractive proposition. If you agree to sell me a copy of the recipe for your herbal paste, I will give you 500 gold pieces. But be quick about it because my time is limited. The proposal was indeed tempting. 500 gold pieces was more than what the family could ever hope to earn from selling pieces of cloth. The grandfather initially hesitated, but under pressure from his children eventually agreed. We will sell you the recipe, but you must promise to keep it a secret so as to protect our business. The businessman smiled and replied, You have my word. The next day, the businessman left town and set out on a long trip. He was on a journey to the capital because he had a meeting with the state's commander-general. After a few days, the businessman was spotted having a drink and laughing hysterically to himself, having sold the formula to the general for 700,000 gold pieces. In the hands of the rural family, the formula allowed them to work harder and for longer in the cold. But in the hands of the general, the army could fight more ferociously and viciously than any other army during the freezing winters. You could argue that the businessman took advantage of the rural family, profiting unfairly from their recipe, but I don't think so. It wasn't about who possessed the formula, it was about who had insight and craftsmanship to create the opportunity. I personally think that one of the most flattering ways to describe someone is to call them a craftsman. A craftsman is mysterious. They have an aura around them that we can't quite put our finger on. A craftsman is also someone who we willingly put an irrational degree of faith in. We don't know what they're going to do or how they're going to do it. We only know that, if we're patient enough, we'll be rewarded with something truly remarkable. What makes Banksy tick? I have no idea, but do I know that his work will be magnificent? A leader is a craftsman. They're someone who uses their wisdom to create a bright new future. Someone who has trained their mind to see the things that we don't, to make the connections that we can't imagine, and to see over the horizon beyond what we can see. They're the ones who know how to take raw ingredients like time, language, physical objects, and the hearts and minds of people and combine them in new ways. While I can't prescribe your exact path to becoming a craftsman, I suspect it might have something to do with learning to follow your own instincts and convictions. Learn to trust them and follow the path that causes a revolution inside of you. Never allow yourself to be a small person. You always need a strategy. Failure can be the result of misfortune, but success must never be left to luck. There's a scene in The Simpsons where Bart, on the night before his test, kneels before his bed and prays, I guess this is the end of the road. I know I haven't always been a good kid, but If I go to school tomorrow, I'll fail the test and be held back. I just need one more day to study, Lord. I need your help. His sister, listening from outside the room, whispers, "Prayer, the last refuge of a scoundrel." I love this scene because it contains a kernel of truth that's buried within all of us, whether we're religious or not. When we can't find a way to solve our problems, when we don't know who to turn to, when our faith in ourselves falters, we turn to God. We choose to relinquish our control to a higher power to make ourselves feel more comfortable with what we need to face in the future. I'll be the first to admit that I've found myself in this position quite frequently over the years, but I also know that prayer is never a replacement for a plan or strategy. Clausewitz said that strategy was the necessary response to the inescapable reality of limited resources. In other words, we need plans because no person or organization has unlimited resources. Without overcomplicating things, all strategy was and is a pre-thought-out plan for making choices on what we should focus on and what we would do in different situations. Most people, unfortunately, are lazy. When was the last time you set aside time just to think? We're usually swept up in a myriad of distractions, including family brunches, dinner dates, and movie nights, making us perpetually reactive to what life throws at us. Sun Tzu is yelling at us to slow down, to slow right down. He wants us to physically sit down with nothing but a blank sheet of paper, with nothing else to do, and confer with ourselves. Have an internal dialogue on what we want, what we might do next to get safely across the rocky terrain, and what the risks, benefits, and costs might be. The time we invest in creating the space for our minds will be repaid many times over in the currencies of patience and wisdom. Zhuge grand strategy. Zhuge was one of the most famous military strategists in Chinese history, serving under Liu Bei during the Three Kingdoms period. And one of his many legacies was crafting the strategy for Liu Bei to establish his dynasty. Liu Bei came from humble beginnings. He was a simple man who sold grass shoes for a living, but he fought valiantly for more than 20 years, slowly changing himself from an unknown commoner into a great general. Although he was accomplished in his own right, before he met Zhuge, he had no sense of his overall goals or direction. He lived in a state of constant insecurity and unease, not knowing what would come from his hard work or where his path would take him. A success in one area was nearly always lost by a failure in another. After meeting Zhuge, Liu Bei said it was like a fish finding water. Zhuge set out his grand strategy for Liu Bei in a strategy now known as the Longzong Plan. It was an ambitious strategy for Liu Bei to establish a united China. The strategy laid out plans for Liu Bei to first build his own state and then to consolidate power from the warlords of the other two states, Sun Quan and Cao. Zhuge opened his strategy with an assessment of the current state of affairs. He said to Liu Bei, "Leave the north to Cao for the moment. Don't even think about it. The gap between you and Cao is too wide. You won't have a chance of winning in a contest. And because you have no chance for victory, don't even fight him. On the other front against Sun Quan, he is also much too strong for you. He inherited power from his brother and father and has the support of the people he rules. The gap between you and Sun Quan is again too wide, but unlike with Cao, don't avoid Sun Quan, befriend him." He continued, "We should avoid the north and the south and instead go westward towards Sichuan. While the land over there is rich in resources, they lack competent leadership. It's ripe for someone who knows how to lead and take care of the people. With your leadership, you could transform Sichuan into a formidable base. After we have built Sichuan as a platform for gathering strength, resources, and talent, only then can we think about expanding north and south across China." Zhuge strategy was so appropriate for the time that it set the course of history for the following decades. In all of China's long history, the period of the Three Kingdoms was the only time that China could maintain the stability required for a balance between three major dynastic powers. Zhuge skill as a strategist was so widely recognized that when historian Chen Shao later tried to criticize Zhuge for only having one move, it was Chen Shao who was criticized for failing to recognize, even with hindsight, how appropriate Zhuge strategy was for the circumstances of the time. What made Zhuge particularly stand out was how strongly he held to the strategy and direction that he had set. Mao Zedong once said, "Once we're on the battlefield, all strategies and plans tend to be forgotten." But this wasn't true for Zhuge. When Keokayo was fleeing after his defeat at the Battle of Red Cliffs, he wrote a letter to his friend saying that he must not fall because the North needed him. Fortunately for him, this was a view that was also shared by Zhuge, because after Zhuge decisively defeated Keokayo, Zhuge chose not to chase him. He let Keokayo return to his stronghold in the north. Why? Because Zhuge was following his grand strategy. He knew that if he had killed Keokayo, the north would fall into chaos, but Liu Bei wouldn't be ready to reap the benefits. While killing Keokayo was tempting, Zhuge knew that not only would it not further Liu Bei's cause, it might have even harmed him. Liu Bei might have tried to conquer the north after his death, biting off more than he could chew. Success was to be measured only in terms of the net gain received, not in terms of the number of battlefield victories. Zhuge strategy was to keep China split into three until Liu Bei's had the strength to claim a united China. He had foresight and a clear view on what the right strategy for Liu Bei was. Indeed, this strategy continued to shape China for the next 50 years.